Should be live.
Hello, everybody. Please let me know if you can hear me here. So this is a new stream that started, right? So it should take a moment for people to see it pop up and get advertised, and they have to click on it, right? Should I just start going, or should we wait for people to connect, Caleb?
Let's just give it a minute.
Are we posting on Discord? And obviously, if you're on YouTube and you're a subscriber, it'll pop up, right?
Right. We'll make sure that the announcement's getting out now as well.
Okay. Also, if people just join a few minutes later, I think it doesn't matter. But yeah, while I give a second for people to arrive, welcome to the New Masters Academy World Art Day celebration. We're extremely excited and very sleep deprived because the whole team has been working really diligently to get a lot of cool stuff prepared for you guys today. We're going to have announcements and all kinds of events. Hopefully you just checked out the kickoff. And this new session with our model Andrea is it's on the YouTube, the New Masters Academy YouTube channel now. I think we published it this morning. So you're not going to be able to work alongside with me with that little screen. It's not possible because I can't stream it 4K, and you're probably not watching it in 4K, so it's going to be too little for you to work from. So if you want to draw along with me and you haven't already done the Andrea thing, you can pull up a second browser and go to New Masters page, and that video should be published for you. So you should be able to draw along with me. Or you can just watch. It's up to you. You can just watch the demo. I'm going to be answering questions as we go here. Caleb is on Discord on my iPad, which is what I'm using I'm using this to see the video, to see my reference. And you guys are going to be seeing the little video in this little picture-in-picture. I think I do have to close my face cam or at least minimize it because I don't have room on the screen, and I don't want to be drawing underneath it. But what I'm going to be talking about and what I'm going to be working on today is actually, I'm really going to be focusing on the stick figure. And the stick figure is something that most of my teachers did not recommend. And if I'm being honest, I think that probably a few years ago, I would have thought that stick figures are a really amateur way to draw, and it's going to result in a very stiff figure. You know what I mean? But I don't actually believe that anymore. And part of this was studying art history and studying, the work that I've been doing that my students are really familiar with. Both doing that academically and doing that in a formal capacity this year, but also just sort of my lifelong pursuit of mastery and looking at art history. What I actually found is that the stick figure was, it's an essential tool, and it was used by Leonardo da Vinci. It was used by artists of the Renaissance. The stereometric figure, like box figures, are just a version of the stick figure. They're a version where the sticks turn into 4 sticks, and then we can, with orthographics, project curvilinear patterns inward. And so I've sort of reassessed the stick figure, and I've been reintegrating it and sort of working on that in my own practice. And so I'm actually excited to get to show you a little bit of that today. So these time poses, it's a short session. It's like an hour and change. And because it's so short and there's so many poses, there's not actually enough time for me to do a proper stick figure. So this is more of a demo, and so you're going to look for the things that get repeated and look for how I'm relating the 3D positions of the sticks, which are more accurate than optical drawings, so like an envelope or angles. The problem with angles is that if you get the angles 10% off, you would like take off my entire shoulder. You're going to distort the whole figure. Whereas if you're dealing with positions, the positions of joints, which is what a stick figure is all about, well, those positions can be off a little bit and it's not going to ruin the drawing. And so there's a lot of advantages to getting real precise position of the joints, which is what the stick figure is all about. One of the biggest advantages is that you can actually apply proportions to the figure, because most of the time we know proportions are important, but we never learn how to actually make sure the sculpture or the drawing or the work has this. So this is really similar to how we work in sculpture. I'm a marble sculptor and a modeler as well. So I'm excited. I actually don't know how this is going to go. This is literally the first time I've demonstrated stick figures anywhere publicly outside of our workshop that we did in Tuscany, where we got into it a little bit last year in the castle in Italy that we did for New Masters Destination. So really excited to present this. I'm going to play the video down here. I think maybe I can just shrink myself like this. Help me. Maybe like this, just because it's got to be small because I kind of want to fill the page. Just so you know. And also, if you have questions or comments, I can't see them, but Caleb's here, and so he's watching the chat, and I have him. He can just speak up at any moment. So if you got questions or at any point, just ask. This is not so much. I know it was kind of. I don't know what the marketing looked like in terms of promoting the event, but this isn't so much about me as an artist. It's more about me wanting to show you this information. So don't feel like you can't ask questions. So. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm gonna try to sync up my version of the model video with what you're seeing on OBS. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't want it to be too loud there. Okay. So I'm going to start with, I probably should just actually take this across. I'm gonna start with a vertical and a horizontal. Horizontals. This is how the ancient Egyptians start. It's really common. Leonardo da Vinci talks about starting this way, and so does Bridgman. Bridgman gets it from Leonardo. But the idea here is that you want to at least have one vertical line, which in the Renaissance was known as the plummet line. And I'm taking this all the way up to the upraised hands in the pose, and so I'm actually running that line in my imagination through the pit of the neck or the suprasternal notch. It's going to be a little hard to tell because it's so small. But what that lets me do essentially is get the axis and the size of the head placed correctly. And in this case, we've got the shoulders high. We've got one arm up. And I'm relating everything I'm doing to that vertical line. So I'm looking at how, for example, the sternum as a straight comes off of that. You'll see what I'm talking about through the repetitions. So I'm departing from that line, I'm returning to that line. But you really want to have at least one vertical line. It was sometimes called the plummet line, like to fall, to plummet, the plumb line. But it's really important because there is no gesture unless it's relative to something, right? Make sure you can see what I'm doing. So what I'm really doing is I'm looking at like the negative space here, and that's how I'm keeping it in alignment. And I'm also using the halves, and I can carry those all the way across too. Because the poses are so short, it actually makes sense probably for me to think like that. And in this case, we've got the legs are spread, and so it's not your typical contrapposto in this case. It's more of an equal spacing. Mine's a little further behind, so I have a few extra seconds to look. But it basically allows me to get a lot of accuracy very quickly. He changed his head once he settled into the pose, but it's fine. I'll stick to what I have. So often what I want to do, so I'm looking at where that's the pubic symphysis. Where is the pubic symphysis? How high above the halfway point is it? And where is it in relation to the plummet line? That's what's going on there. And so I have actually sort of I have not just used the stick figures as they were used historically, though. It's pretty close. This is pretty close to the Codex Huygens, which you can find on the Morgan Library's website. So I sort of using the traditional stick figure as a starting point, the way it was sort of talked about and taught during the Renaissance and afterwards. But if I'm being frank, I actually wanted to add a little bit of more anatomical and sculptural precision. So I actually have made it a little more. I've just made some little tweaks that are my own tweaks, but that's not really the key. The key is that I actually know where the sticks are, in where the rods are. The measuring rods is another way to think of it. I know where these are in 3D space. That's the actual key. You can design your own, but the idea is that I'm looking for simple positional continuity, curvature continuity. So in other words, what I'm looking for is I'm looking to just get things in the right place on the page. And so in a way, it's both optical and it's also constructive because it's representing the 3D joint position, right? It's not just a shape. It's representing a 3D joint position. Like in this case, this is the triangle sacrale. Here would be the positions of the medial and superior borders. But you can see that when I have actually been practicing this in order to do this performance for you guys, to present this information. But when you know exactly where the positions are, like not vague, not 2D, but you truly know where it is, specifically. So I know where these 3D points are in space. Here, in this case, we've got I'm going to put the scapula there. The great advantage of that is speed and accuracy and clarity. So I can sort of move quickly. And the next stage after the simple sticks, which I'm sort of teasing right there, the next step is actually simple round forms, the way Glenn Villeput teaches it, who is among my many teachers and mentors, but the most significant one. It was basically like an apprenticeship that I did with Glenn. So what he calls simple round forms in the Villeput drawing manual that we sell, it's chapter 2. But those simple round forms are really traditional art. And so what I tell my students to do, what I've been telling them to do lately is to work on that. You think about seeds, right? A seed shape. So basically a shape like this with one long C curve and then two fullnesses. So I call it the seed or the bean and the curves between. So essentially, if you want to know a simple way to, if you're not a student at New Masters and you want to work on that aspect of it, what you can do is find, this is an assignment I've been giving, find the unfinished illustrations that Botticelli did for Dante's Inferno and copy the figures in those, which are going to seem very simple. They're going to seem too simple for you, but they're not. Trust me, they're actually quite difficult. But because the simple round seeds, beans, and those curves, because those are so simplified and elegant, and they actually are development sketches, you can really get a really nice sense of how that works. And so that's all. I think that's pretty much all I'm going to be dealing with today. I just lost it here, but I have a few extra seconds here. But those are the primary tools. And so it's the sticks, but it's also these round forms, these ancient Greek, ancient Roman, Byzantine, Etruscan, but above all, ancient Greek designs, which during the Renaissance were really beautifully designed, and that's where we get a lot of the training that survives today. And so I know we talk about gesture and structure in a sort of narrative way often, like that's how we talk with Steve Houston, and that's how how we present it often on New Masters Academy, that you've got structure and you've got gesture. You know, it's like fire and ice. It is these two opposing dualistic ideas, and they serve sort of a narrative. They can serve a narrative function in the story of the piece, the visual story that you're telling. Well, that's one way to think about it, but another way to think about it is that they're not actually in opposition. So the stick figures are not actually stiff if they're positioned correctly. The flows need those those relationships in order to the curves need the positions to be correct. I'm just going to do another row here. The positions need to be correct for the flows to be correct. And so in other words, the sticks being positioned, the joints, everything being positioned in the right place on the page is what allows those round forms and those curves to flow correctly, for them to have the correct continuity. So I actually think from a geometric perspective, another way of thinking about them rather than structure and gesture being oppositional but artistically useful dualistic ideas is that they're actually the same thing. You're just essentially drawing a different aspect of the geometric reality. So right now I'm just choosing to find the femoral head and the top of the tibia, but I can just as easily, and I can also do the trochanter, but I can just as easily do this. Look, I'll show you right here. I can actually look. What's really useful is having that vertical going through the pit of the neck, just so it helps me get my widths right. And I do want to divide. This is also really useful. And then, even if it's not perfect, dividing it into quarters is really useful. But look, I'm still thinking of the same positional relationships here. Like, I'm not actually changing the way I'm overall thinking, but you can see that and this is what I'm doing, like if you watch Joshua Loves to Draw, which really should be called Joshua Loves to Sketch, but if you look at how I sketch, I'm sort of doing the stick figure without consciously thinking of it in terms of just trying to get the positional accuracy. So if that's the navel, let's say, and that's, so in other words, what I'm saying is that what I'm doing right now with these simple sort of Renaissance-y looking round forms, that's hanging on the positions. And the positions are, like even if I can't see that head fully, I've got a different, these aren't perfectly synced up. So the video you're seeing is like a few seconds off. So, but this head here, maybe I can adjust it. Even though I can't see it, if I'm constantly drawing the ovoid, and that's what I use, I recommend everybody uses an ovoid for the head as your starting point, because it's the simplest geometry, it's the closest fit to the head, and a lot of people know this, I don't really care for like the Loomis construction, just simply because it's a version of the ovoid or egg that is overcomplicated in a way that's not helpful. But the traditional ovoid, like our head has to fit through the pelvic floor of our mother when we're born during childbirth, just like a chicken egg has to fit through the pelvis of a chicken. And so it's not a coincidence that the egg is a good object for life and getting a sense of life and nature, and especially for the head, because it's quite literally, our heads are natural forms. And so I don't think of the ovoid as just an abstraction. I think of it as actually the natural, the forms of nature. And so I highly recommend a simple round form. I still have my guy up here, so I think I'm actually, nope, he's going away. So I highly recommend starting your heads with an egg. Yeah?
I have a question from Ruchi.
From who?
They want to know, what method do you prefer, starting with gesture or the stick figure or gestural lines to create the flow of the drawing?
So I think it kind of depends on whether it's what the role is of it. Because if I'm doing compositional sketches, you can see this like on my Instagram. But when I'm doing compositional sketches, I'm also dealing more with the simple round forms. And the reason why is it just depends on what you're looking for at that stage of the development. So one thing that's a little bit frustrating is that today we kind of conflate sketching and drawing and performing, like performing for an audience or pretending it's a sketch where really it's for an audience. Like all that stuff kind of gets sort of mixed up today. But I think you really want to have a clear idea of what the purpose is. So if I'm just trying to get the flows and the volumes and kind of play those against one another, like Michelangelo's Bozzetti, which is where my educational journey sort of started. This would be ASIS, and that would be the pubic symphysis. So it depends. So, but if you want the drawing to come out good, if you want it to work, it needs to be accurate. In other words, the stick figure needs to be positioned correctly. So essentially, both the stick figure and the simple round forms, or the seeds, the beans, the curves between, both of those things are just constructions that allow you to get close to your real goal. What is your real goal? Like, what are we trying to end up with the drawing development? Well, your real goal is actually to hang the orthographic sculptural curves of the body. So think of a sculpture and how sculptures are designed. Your real goal is to actually get those curves hung in place. And so to that end, let me actually put this one here, even though this is not the one we're working on. To that end, it actually, all that matters is that the sculptural curves, like the profile of my face from the side, that gets correctly positioned in 3D. Okay, so I'm gonna make a new layer here. I think is probably the best thing because we might want to keep this, and then
I have something from New Guy. He says, really love the measuring lines. The stick seems kind of contrary to the Glenn Villepeu technique of flowy gesture lines. I know that you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but maybe you can circle back to that.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just pause it for a second here because I lost sync on these while I was trying to fix the scene here. So let me just take give me 1 second to answer the question because I don't want to get confused here and mess up my, I don't want to mess up my thing. This is because it's changing the layout is a little tricky here. Can you, oh, what are you guys seeing? Okay. So I'm just going to do a new layer, and then at the end, I'll export this out, and if anybody wants to. I don't know if it's actually even worth it, if it's going to come out good enough for that, but hold on, let me see. So now we're in the 2 minute. I'm going to eat that time loss and just go ahead with it anyway. So I'm just going to start these both up. But if these get too far out of sync, because I'm at 153 here, so sorry, can we come back to that question? Because I just had to, this is a little bit technically tricky what I'm doing here. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, so a New Guy was saying that they really love the measuring lines. The stick figure seems kind of contrary to the Glenn Villepeu technique of flowy gesture lines.
So the way look, I'm about to interview Glenn, so I can actually ask him about stick figures on your behalf, and so we can hear it right from him directly. But you know, Harry Carmine was Glenn's teacher, and that's, I don't know if you can see, there's artwork in my home that's by Harry. Harry was also influential on me as well. But Harry would sort of use elements of the stick figure, and because of that, that's also how Carl Ganass, who was another Carmine student, he'll use aspects of the stick figure. But I'll ask that question for Glenn. My understanding is that the stick figure was ubiquitous in art, and then during sort of the modernist and postmodernist eras, it fell out of favor. But what I think, the way I think about it, not the way Glenn teaches it, but the way I think about what Glenn's doing when he does these flowing gestures, like his 1 minutes and his, you know, basically week 1 of the Villepeu stuff, is he's doing the same thing, right? He's drawing the figure, but he's drawing the flows between the axes, and those axes are the sticks. So he's sort of drawing the water. He's not drawing the little pinball Mario blocks that the water's falling on that are tilting, that are creating the flow. So he's drawing the flow directly, but you need both, right? Because the flow only flows correctly. It only has the correct continuity. The flow only works, in other words, if it is, if the positions are right. So, in other words, to put it in like more of like a technical terms, the positional curvature continuity of the body is important to get the higher levels of continuity, such as flow. So that's a Joshua answer because you're asking me. But what I would say is that even though Glenn is not using a stick figure, and he probably would, I'm guessing that Glenn and my teachers and colleagues, many of them wouldn't want to use a stick figure because it is, they think it creates a stiff look, right? Because they're only going to use the boxes and sticks and things like this to strengthen what they've already got down. And so, but the way I really think of it is Glenn's gesture drawings are a version of a stick figure. He's just drawing the flows between the sticks, and he's not drawing the sticks themselves, the rods, but they are present. When Glenn does the vertical and horizontal measurements, that's part of his drawing manual in his courses, right? Well, those are optical. Those horizontals and verticals are optical measurements. Look, this is like the seed here. I think I don't know what's happening here. I have the arm out. Am I crazy? Or maybe I saw it before he moved it, but I'll just keep it out. Why not? I actually kind of like it out more. Yeah, that's the nice thing about these poses, by the way, is that because it's a video, the way we're doing these, you can actually see something at some point, and even if the model changes it, you could actually, you could still do it that way. And Glenn's big on that, changing what he sees. But and I can do some too where I'm not drawing the sticks as explicitly to show what I mean, that there's not actually look, normally beginners are drawing very stiff and they're copying, and the way Glenn would say it, they're drawing very optically. And so we have to sort of, part of the goal of what a lot of the teachers are trying to do is they're trying to deprogram that, right?
I've got a question from Hai Kai.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, is the best way to study figures? Longer studies or gestures, or neither?
You actually need both, I think, if you're going to be designing your own poses. And so if you are going to, it depends on what you're doing, right? But if the idea is that you have to design these amazing, beautiful poses and figure drawings, then you actually kind of need both. At least that's currently the best way we know how to teach it, because you learn certain things in your sketching that you end up using in your finals. But I tell a lot of students not to just sketch, because a lot of students take that too literally, and they're just like, oh, well, I'm just going to sketch the way an animator sketches, or sketch the way a comic artist sketches, and I'm just going to do that until I master it. The problem with that is that you probably are not going to be able to master it, because the reason why is my video looks different than what I'm seeing. Is he rotating? I think he's actually... I don't know, maybe somebody can notice this, but I keep noticing is he changing his pose as he goes? Because I thought I could have sworn the head was down, but now I'm seeing it up. Sorry, I got a little off track on that. I just got distracted because I thought maybe I missed the change of the pose. But the reason you need both is that only by finishing the work can you actually understand what sketching is. Sketching is shitty drawing. It's fast, shitty drawing. So it's a good way to, with a low time investment, experiment and learn things. Whoa, that's crazy. Well, this is a really wide one. Yeah, this is why I'm glad I plan this in advance so I don't run out of space here because it wouldn't come out so good. But sketching is basically a quick version, just like a sloppy doctor's signature, right? It's that old joke about doctor signatures. That's a very sloppy version of calligraphy, right? But it's fast, and that's why we use sketching for exploration and composition and ideation, however you want to say it. We use sketching because it's very quick and free and loose, and we're able to kind of develop ideas with less commitment and with less distraction, right? Those are some of the advantages. The disadvantages, of course, is that they're not going to come out accurate. They're always going to look wonkier. They're always going to be a little off, right? And so the trick is to know when to use sketching and when to really develop your drawings. And I think that doing longer poses and shorter poses, doing both, I think that's actually a really that's a very useful and instructive way to think about it, because what's going to happen is you're going to discover that. But if you just are sketching, like I find this a lot with some of our students who have come from other communities before coming to NMA, and maybe they've been studying other sources or whatever, and some of them have really bought into this idea of sketching, and they don't want to move on to the long stuff because they believe that they're not ready for it. But what I tell students when they're in that camp is basically that you'll never be ready for it unless you do the long poses, because you don't even understand what sketching is. Sketching is a quick version of drawing. But if you don't understand how drawing works, your sketches are going to be just imitating your favorite. They're going to be just imitating your favorite, comic artist or whatever, whether it's My Witch Academia or you're just imitating your favorite stuff that you sort of grew up with, and you're imitating other people's sketching styles, but you're not going to understand the role it actually is. And so sketching is not just like it used to be that sketching wasn't even considered a final art. It's only within more recent timescales that sketching became seen as an art form. Sketching they're a category known as working drawings, and the idea of working drawings is they help you develop something. They're not the point. They're not the artwork. They're how we arrive at the artwork. And so I think the role of sketching has changed a lot, especially because of the popularity of many sketching styles. And so as a result of that, I think people are a little confused about sketching. They think sketching is like a philosophy and it's a style. And when in reality, sketching is a poor man's version, a quick and dirty, however you want to say it. It's a quick and dirty version of good drawing. Well, why aren't we just drawing well all the time if that's what it is? Well, because I don't know what the design is yet. I actually did practice this because I wanted to be fast, because this is crazy how fast I have to do these things. So I actually did practice this, but sketching is useful when you don't already have the design. So I don't already have these finished designs. I don't have these drawings that I'm making. So if I did, I would just grid them up and I would transfer them to my canvas, or I would transfer them onto the side of a block in orthos, and then I would get to work on the final art. But if I don't already have the designs, if I'm making a new design, which was called dell'occhio in the time of the Renaissance, so I'm not just using a Madonna head that has a grid that I take out and then I frickin' pounce and transfer that to the canvas. I don't have these patterns yet. This is new to me. So we did this video recently. These are new poses, right? So until some master comes along and does these perfect drawings that then other artists can imitate or trace or transfer. I'm sort of relating this to the Renaissance idea. Until a master has turned this information into designs, it's just raw. It's raw and unfiltered. It's photography. It's representing nature, but it's not actually designed yet. It's natural and distorted because it's photography.
I have a few questions here. I know that it's kind of hard breaking up the flow, but we're kind of getting a backlog on these.
Uh-huh.
So So can you explain a little bit more about your vertical line, your plummet placement? Is it always
Yeah.
where the pit of the neck is?
I'm putting it where the pit of the neck is because that's the common place to put it traditionally. So it tends to. The reason why is that when the figure is bent, we naturally put our weight on one leg or the other leg, and as we do that, we also have to do that to walk because we have to free up the leg to take a step, and so because of the natural way humans stand, that's called contrapposto. This natural counterbalancing. That comes from 5th century Greek art, so Polykleitos. That's the anatomical work I've been working on. I've actually, I'll be presenting this hopefully this year at conferences, but I actually worked out the original canon of proportions by Polykleitos. It's a mystery that's thousands of years old. And in so doing, I actually learned that isonomia, or equilibrium and balance, is, a lot of people give that credit of contrapposto. They give it more to the Renaissance artists, but it's definitely ancient Greek, and that there tends to be this alignment where the weight-bearing leg, so this is the weight-bearing leg here, the weight-bearing leg, well, look, he's got his foot up on a box, so this is not a usual situation, but like, for example, here, the weight-bearing leg, if you go inside that leg and go straight up, it's going to tend to, in a balanced pose, according to Leonardo, it's going to line up with the sternal notch, the navel, and the pubic symphysis. In an unbalanced pose, like a running pose or something, they're going to lean off of that. And so it's a way for you to gauge it's a way, and also hokusai, you can see examples of in the NMA Rare book library. Sorry, I'm just seeing some things I want to change. You can see that that's a really common thing to look for that. But yeah, it's Leonardo who prescribes it, and that's probably why it's so ubiquitous. But in reality, it's coming just like everything. It's all ancient Egyptian and ancient Greek to some degree, so it's coming from there. But the idea is that that's where the balance from a frontal view is going to tend to line up, and so I'm just choosing for speed. Oh, I have 30 something seconds left. For speed, I'm actually choosing to. Oops, a little too much. I'm choosing to just hit the pit of the neck every time, and then I'm looking for how far each foot is off of that. And I'm also looking for the halfway, so that would be like here maybe. I'm also looking at, because you notice like if the hand's upraised, the figure's smaller. Why? Because it saves me time to do it like this. And I can reuse the halfway mark and the quarters. So, the plummet's just going through the pit of the neck. In a rear view, I'll sometimes use C7, and there's other places you could use it too. But by using the same repeatedly in this performance, right? Because this isn't natural. I wouldn't be drawing so fast, right? If I was working these out, I would really be taking my time just because of where I am in my development. But for you guys, I have to perform it, and it has to be fast because it's part of a schedule and stuff. And so I had to make a bunch of considerations here on how to actually make the performance work. But essentially, I do recommend that. Just run a vertical line. Look, right here. It's the pit of the neck, right here. You see it? It's the pit of the neck, right here. Pit of the neck, right here. That's where I'm putting it. And then I'm looking at the video, and I'm looking at my reference, and I'm seeing what is intersected by that, right? And so off this top quarter, maybe around this high, we have we've got a box, maybe something like that. And it's a similar thing. I basically want to make sure it's accurate, which I know is not always the focus of the instructor. A lot of times they say the accuracy isn't important. But because the accuracy, if I was modeling this in clay, I would need to bend this armature into position or nothing would work. And so I don't think because we're drawing we get off the hook for accuracy. It just has to do with like what the priorities are. But yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the placements of these rods? Are you going between joints, and is the focus on proportional accuracy of their lengths, or what is? Can you talk
the focus is proportional accuracy of their lengths. If I was working from imagination, I would. Not imagination. Imagination versus observation is sort of a false dichotomy that I want to get away from. But basically, if I was not working from a live model and I was designing it on my own, I would be taking the ortho patterns like DeWitt, like we've been teaching, and then I would pose those rods. And so essentially they're like perspective rods, like Eric Olson will use, or Craig Atterbury, they'll use a perspective rod in their constructions. It's the simplest thing to put in perspective. And so yes, it's a measuring rod. It's essentially like, all measurement comes from antiquity, right? And so this is an ancient Egyptian, this is what the ancient Egyptians would use. This is a measuring rod. And so essentially that's what this is. This is just a, look, it's just this, except for it's infinitely thin. So yeah, it's about getting the lengths correct and positioning them in the joint correct. But since I'm working from photography, I'm working from video here because of what we're doing. I'm also able to do that optically, and so I'm actually getting in a way it's optical and constructive because I'm actually like right now this knee right here is this knee is lining up with this line that I have, so I can just I'm using that to place things. So it's actually both. And that's really the point of what I'm trying to show. What I'm trying to show is that most of what I believe is important, like asis, pubic symphysis between the asis, navel, sort of a center line being broken into straights. This is a line that's sort of, this is the nipple, that's the nipple. This is a line that's 90 degrees to the simple straight line I'm using for the sternum, and then I'm just connecting that with the head of the humerus, and this is the acromion process. Here would be the acromion process down to the sternal notch. So what I'm doing that is a little bit different than how most stick figure ideas, because even if they're not taken that seriously by professional artists and like the top schools, they are still used. A lot of people use stick figures. Comic artists use a version of it. Marvel Way to Draw, they use a version of it. A lot of artists use it, but usually the sticks are not very precise. So one difference between what I'm doing here is I'm using a little more of my experience. I'm using a little bit more of my experience with the figure in my anatomical study and all this, and I'm using that to make sure that it's not just a stick figure that I really am trying to get. I'm thinking of it like I'm building an armature and I'm building this physically. So for me, I'm thinking the way I think when I sculpt. And so it is a little bit of a Joshua Jacobo version of it. But if you really want to know the essence of what I'm doing, go to the we have this on New Masters Academy, but if you're not a New Masters Academy subscriber, go to the Morgan Library website, which is a fantastic museum in Southern California. I used to spend a lot of time there. And look up Codex, I don't know how the correct way to pronounce it, but it's Huygens. It's after Leonardo, and it's a theoretical art book. And that's essentially where I am jumping off from. When I did anatomy masterclass is around the time that I was doing that research. So at this point, I was doing that research maybe 4 years ago. And I was actually getting into it for stereometrics. So I was actually trying to do stereometrics. And stereometrics are like Cambiasso, there's those, or like Kim Jung-gi, really, or Marvel or Vilpu. All of them are, anyone who's using boxes to draw the figure, that's called stereometrics. That's what I was actually looking for. I was studying Durer and Piero della Francesca and those masters. I was studying those masters in order to build stereometric models in 3D that I could pose and then do an entire drawing approach off of that. That's what I was after. But what ended up happening was I realized that the boxes are just the same. The sticks are actually the simplest version. And because the sticks are simpler than the boxes, because it's one edge instead of 4 edges, and then the edges of the top, the ends, the faces. So because of that, it's actually more direct. And what I've found is that the more direct something is geometrically speaking, the more useful it is, because we want to be able to manage the complexity as we work. And so having a really complex way to build a figure like the Loomis head, having a needlessly complex way to do something, it might seem like it's useful. Look at this, how a stick figure can help you with foreshortening right here. Look at that. and then it's the, because this is really, really compressed here. It can really help. So yeah, it's actually more elegant. You want the simplest tool possible, because I can take these sticks and I can turn them into cylinders just by adding geometric ellipses with no perspective plotting whatsoever, right? I can turn those cylinders. I don't know if I'll have time to do that here, but if I teach this as a class or something in the future, oh no, I'm too far over. You guys can't see what I'm doing. This is the problem. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better. So basically, I can make this more complex, but I actually want it to be as simple as possible, because that allows me to move with the most confidence and the most precision. So that's actually what I'm after here, and you can see that happening here. I'm kind of intentionally switching between, and I'm not drawing. This isn't like how I draw for Joshua Loves to Draw, which is more like sketching however I am feeling like it in that moment. Instead, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to be really didactic, so you can really see. But what I've found is that the simpler and more universal the tool, the better the tool in many ways, because you can master that tool and then you can use it in so many different ways. Whereas some tools are more specific and they can only be used in a certain way. And so you want to try to prioritize those tools. Like, look, I can do a hand like this. I mean, this is really, really small, but this is how and so I was actually doing this kind of thing without realizing it, that it was a stick figure for many years, and then sort of found out, had just sort of changed my understanding of it later. But as you can see here, there's no real trade-off here. Now I'm trying to be really accurate, partially because of the way I'm going about it, and how fast I'm working and how small I'm working and everything. But let me actually take this down a little bit and I can show you something. The real thing that needs to happen after whatever the construction is hanging these simple Fioletti C-curves onto this and really designing the center line, for example, and getting these curves to actually feel quite, that's the epigastric fossa, quite natural. And so look how fast, this is kind of the payoff here, but look at how fast I can, if I've sort of been diligent and I've done my homework like a good art student, and I've set things up properly, look at how I don't have to worry about accuracy anymore, and now I can totally just change my focus to, in this case, the curves of the silhouette, or the curves of the, or it could be tone, or it could be rendering, or whatever. But I've set myself up well for the next stages, and that's what I think. That's something I really learned from building things in 3D and building sculptures and doing really complex stuff, marble carving and casting and all these kinds of things, is that the geometry is the geometry. It's not a matter of opinion. It's just it needs to be right if your work is going to make sense. And so I know from experience as a sculptor that sketching it loose and saying the accuracy doesn't matter is a little bit of a cop-out, because you can't actually build anything great that way. You can only sketch and do cool-looking sketches. But I think many of us, we want to do our graphic novel, we want to do our grand project, our ambitious projects, and for that, sketching by itself is not enough. Like that's
so
actually.
That leads into questions some people are asking about where this fits into the flow. Is this something that is just part of practicing so you can understand, or is this the necessary design step before you create a painting or a drawing or a sculpture?
It really depends on what we're talking about. You actually need more context, because right now I'm doing a figure drawing demo. That's a very weird thing that I'm doing right now, because the old masters didn't draw from life this way. They wouldn't do like 1-minute poses. They wouldn't do, so if you look at the old masters and you look for like life drawings, figure drawings, what you're going to find is that this practice that we all do of like drawing many figures quickly, that's more of a contemporary practice. And so when we start talking about how the art tradition was, you have to kind of start untangling a lot of differences that you think are not incompatible, but they are. And so usually, like if we talk about the old masters, what they were often doing was they were posing patterns. And so they are collecting patterns and developing patterns. By patterns, I mean like orthos, for example, or a hand or a face or something that's gridded up or something that is, patterns are built on a grid traditionally. And so they're posing patterns. And so when they're posing patterns, they're not drawing Andrea because Andrea's not what they're after. They're trying to design these insane, or think of Peter Paul Rubens or something, like these insane worlds and scenes and characters, and they're not just trying to capture nature like a specific person. So the way they used models was different than the way that we sort of think about it and use it today. So you kind of have to start unpacking that. But I do think that what I'm demonstrating right now, which is basically a stick figure that's accurately placed on a plumb line or plummet line, right? And then breaking this into quarters. You can do this accurately with measurement or not. So just that first step there of the vertical line and then those quadrants is incredibly, it will improve your drawings immediately. It doesn't matter which class you're in. You could do this in any of the new master's classes or so just by doing that and learning, and just, you have to practice it right, because it's not always intuitive, because sometimes you have like a head or something that is over. I want to put the stick in this guy's hand. Sometimes you have a head that is, the hand is higher than the head, for example. And when that happens, it's going to, you have a choice. You can just go to the top of the head, or you can, like, with the upraised arm, you could make that the top. Because I'm working from nature here, I'm choosing to do it in that more optical way. But that's up to you.
So because the old masters
were
working differently, and they were posing patterns and approaching this in a different way, how do we go about studying or doing master studies? Do we try to apply this sort of knowledge? It's a little complicated, because for the most part, what the old masters were doing, that legacy survives today, but for the most part, in many forms, right? So the legacy of Leonardo da Vinci, the legacy of all of these masters survives today, but it doesn't survive in the original context. And so it's actually a lost art. That's why I had to figure this stuff out, and I've been studying it for so long, is because I'm studying these old drawing manuals and stuff. There's no curriculum for this that teaches it, unfortunately. It was lost to time, a lot of it. And so if you're doing a master study, the tricky thing is actually knowing, the tricky thing about the master study is knowing how it was actually done, because that takes, I don't agree with a lot of art historians on some aspects, or I don't agree with how the museums are categorizing it, or I don't agree with my teachers who are some of the best artists in the world. And so it's not that simple. Like, part of the craft is making it look like, part of the craft of mastery, at least traditionally, is making it not obvious how it was done. Sort of like a jazz musician who is putting a napkin over their hand to hide their fingering. It's an illusion. It's a performance. The old masters didn't want you to know how it's done. It's not like Kim Jong-gi or something or Glenn Villepeu, where the sketching is the attraction. It's like, we're here to see a master of sketching. That's not how the old masters were. They, in fact, like Panil supposedly stole Peter Paul Rubens's studio drawings, the Cantor, the famous Cantor. So supposedly, like, it's intellectual property. So just like how if you work for Disney or something, or some big company, you're not going to be able to share the production artwork. I'm sure you guys run into that.
with artists you follow or something, they can't share the production work. The idea is it wasn't this like, let's all share. These artists were competing with each other for commissions and projects and stuff. And so this is intellectual property. It's basically, they were like corporate, there was corporate espionage or the equivalent of that. And so they're not trying to make it, they're trying to make you see this amazing illusion. And that's why even master artists are so confused about the old masters often. I was talking to somebody I respect a lot, and they were talking about like the David, Michelangelo's David, and they're like, I wonder what the model was this or the model was that. And I was saying, I don't think there was a model for the David. That's just an Apollo set of drawings and patterns that he's making you feel like it's realistic. It's not actually from life. And I think that's often the case, that the trouble is we sort of project our contemporary understandings of things. We project those backwards on the old masters. And so we get confused. So I've seen so many demos by amazing artists, and they're demoing, they're talking about the old masters, but they're getting it wrong in terms of what historically was going on. And they're sort of projecting their own. And that happened from like the 18th century on with Leonardo. And it's only until recently where with Leonardo da Vinci, they realized a lot of the scholars, like there's a book, there's a collection of academic essays on this. But what they realized was that Leonardo is really not, he was sort of designed to be this modern master is how he was being presented, but he was doing the same thing the other artists were doing. He was using classical patterns. He was basing his heads off Della Robbia. And in reality, it's just he was doing it at a high level. But it wasn't that he was, people want to, I mean, think of like Hockney, for example, where there's this argument that the old masters were, how were they so good? How were they so amazing? You know, everyone's got these ideas, but Hockney's like, oh, well, they were using optical techniques. They weren't really drawing these drawings the way we think they were. That's not possible. You know, what they were really doing is they were really using camera obscura and stuff. And a lot of side-size artists have bought into that idea. But I think when you understand how something is done, it makes more sense. And when it's something that you can't do and you don't understand it, you're using your imagination. So I think that's the problem. There's a lot of imagination going on. People think they know what Michelangelo or Durer or Degain or Goltzius or Tintoretto or whoever the master is. They think they know what they were doing, but they actually are off base. And I think that there's quite a lot of that going on, I think. And so it's actually not easy to know how these works were done. It's a lost art. You know, if you know, you could probably make a business out of understanding that. You know, you could be teaching that. So the reality is we don't really know, and that's why I've had to do so much of my own research over the years, because these are answers that the best teachers in the world don't have. And so it's an ongoing exploration of mine, which is trying to reconstruct the classical, because I don't think what is called classical art today is actually classical, because it's not actually similar in process. So that's a tough one. What I'm presenting to you right now is my work, and I'm trying to put it into like the context of a sort of a demo or tutorial for you, but this content doesn't exist. Otherwise, I wouldn't have needed to work on it. So that's a tough one. Unfortunately, a lot of what was mastered in the past has been lost. But I think that as a community at New Masters Academy, the students, the teachers, everybody together, a lot of us are reconstructing, rediscovering a lot of this. And I think there's a big movement, and that's part of the popularity and why New Masters Academy has been growing so tremendously for over a decade, and why we've become the leaders is because we're asking some of these questions, whereas I think a lot of other educational sources, at least, the chin was higher before. Now on mine, the chin's being obscured. I'm going to keep it up. I don't think I have time to get into it, but I'm going to keep it up.
Joshua, people are wondering how this can apply to drawing things other than the figure, like animals and other things, especially how the Google. All right, look, my research, my recent research, the stuff I'm going to be presenting, I can't talk about it because it's literally, I'm trying to get it into conferences, and I can't
teach that stuff before. But what I will tell you is that despite what the history books say, because the history books will tell you that the ancient Egyptians were probably using grids, but then the Greeks changed that, and then they made it more modern, essentially. But in reality, I'm quite convinced that the Greeks were also designing everything on a grid as well. So everything gets designed with orthographics on grids. So Google ancient Egyptian grid animal, and you'll see there's a few examples of this. They designed everything on grids. They designed these patterns on grids. So they're curves on a grid. And then to make sculpture, they would take the grid and that design of the bird or whatever, and then they would add a front view. So let's say it's the bird from the side. They would add the bird from the front view. And then you carve away the bird from the front view, you carve away the bird from the side view, and the side views are mirrored of each other. And then you've got a 3D object. Well, what the Renaissance artists and other artists before them figured out is that once you carve something or make something in 3D, you can then pose it in any angle with different light, and then you can draw from that to create new patterns, infinite patterns from any angle and lighting situation. And so the main idea is it's basically simple outline drawings on grids, patterns, in other words, and then it is, when it gets more illusionistic and perspective and stuff gets invented and it gets more realistic, it changes to become with more of a focus on a 3D illusionistic reality like relievo and chiaroscuro and all this of the Renaissance. And that is based, all of the studios had the students not only doing the Fioletti stuff that we do and all that stuff, but all the studios had plaster casts. So they're working from plaster casts. So in other words, they're getting the patterns from casts. That's how they're doing it. So, but those casts were designed, like the Barg plates. The Barg plates look great because they're based on masterful sculptures. That's why they look so good, right? Well, those casts, those masterful sculptures from antiquity were designed using orthos on grids. So the secret, the big headline here is you have to design with orthos on grids and then find some way to pose that, either by making a model, like Titian would make a clay model based on the orthos, or Michelangelo would make or like Leonardo and Piero della Francesca, where you're using more things that exist only on the page. But either way, the main idea here is that it's the patterns that we need to pose. That's how we get a good result. Even if we're also working from life and even if we are getting a lot of this information from life, it's the same idea. So it's about, in this case, for me, in this demonstration, it's about getting the positions correctly, and then it is about tying it together with round forms to give it a sense of, how much time do I have left on this? 1 minute and 20. Maybe the next one, I was hoping to get into rendering, but now what I'm understanding is like it's not likely. But it's get the curves right, get the outlines right. That's the key. Go ahead, Caleb.
We got about 17 minutes here before we're going to break, and then when we get back, we're going to look at some work. But help us understand this process. If I was going to approach a painting or a drawing, would it make sense to first design the orthos and then use this stick figure approach to figure out my posing and my gesture? Applying that to those gestures?
You could do something like that. That's actually something you could do, because at New Masters for the last 10 years, the way we've been doing our photos is we try to minimize the perspective distortion. Cameras are a problem. And so you could actually go with this Andrea set. We always do these turnarounds, and I've been doing that because I know how important it is. So from the turnarounds, you could get something like an ortho profile of Andrea, and I'm just looking at a picture on the other screen here. I'm not doing it perfectly. I'm just trying to demonstrate it. But what you can do is you could actually create an ortho pattern from our photography and then use this to pose it into 3D. But you don't actually have to do that. All you actually need to have is a template. So you just need to have an ortho. It can be from a master. It can be Vitruvian Man. It could be Codex Huygens. It could be Jacob de Witt. It could be Larès. It could be Rubens. If you have some ortho sheets of a proportional, beautifully designed figure from different angles, well, then you could use that, and then you just blend Andrea, the model that you see in front of you, let me move this over. You could just blend Andrea with your template. And that's sort of what we're doing, even if we don't realize it, right? We're always sort of doing this in a way, because unless we're spending a lot of time getting everything correctly, we're relying on our so-called intuition and experience. Well, what is that? That's just our half-baked mental templates that I'm talking about. So if I ask you to draw an eye and you draw this eye, people would say that's a symbol. That's bad theory. It's not a symbol. It's literally the pattern of the eye that we recognize, and an infant can recognize it, and a dog could recognize it. So these patterns are how our brain sort of makes sense of things. So by studying them explicitly in the form of, which all designers do, all architects and engineers, they all do this. By studying it explicitly, we take accountability for it, and we're able to use it and reuse it and be more efficient, like the way that animation, big budget animation projects do, where they have Pinocchio and they've made a physical wood model, and they've also done turnarounds, and they know and then they practice it, and then they also use nature, and they use video, and they use performances, and they combine all that together to make an illusion. Well, that's how the old masters worked too. So I think that there's not one answer for that. It really has to do with what you're going for in your work. But what I will say is that, in my opinion, and I'm really focusing on the stuff that I'm talking about is stuff that is maybe not the same as other sources. That's why, because I don't need to come here and do gesture drawings for you, because we've got Glenn Vilppu, and he's the best on earth, and he taught everybody. And the Vilppu drawing manual has been the gold standard for gesture for all industries since the 90s. So I don't have to, so what I'm trying to contribute is actually stuff that is not, it's not what other teachers are teaching. So I'm focusing on something that is a contribution, but everything that is in the New Masters Academy foundations and how we cover gesture and how we cover anatomy with Ray Bustos and Galeotti and Carl Gnass and Glenn Vilppu and Mike Matesi and all these master artists, they're all giving you their take on it. But the real root of all of this is the art tradition, and that art tradition is centuries and millennia and maybe even hundreds of thousands of years old. Like there's Olmec sculptures that are over 40,000 years old that are done the exact same way I'm talking about. There's ancient stuff and prehistoric stuff, which is this stuff is older than we know. It doesn't belong to any of us. And so personally, what I find is, in addition to studying with the best artists of today, which is what New Masters Academy is all about, in addition to that, it's good to do your own master studies, your own research of historical artwork as well. And so that's been sort of my approach here. And so for me, Glenn Vilppu helped me understand the old masters, but once I really found how what he teaches and what the old masters are teaching are overlapping, and what he's changing and how he's changing that, I have a greater understanding. And so that's sort of part of what I'm trying to impart with all of you, is that most of the best knowledge we have, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it the Riley method. You can call it the Ryder method. You can call it, there's so many different approaches. It's all rooted in the traditional stuff, but that doesn't mean that they all do it as equally as effectively. Some traditions today are more three-dimensional, or they work better for designing things that don't exist, or they work better for portraiture or whatever. So they're all sort of a subset, but all of the best stuff is rooted in this tradition. There's very little, there's some things like color theory and maybe some things with like silhouette and shape design. There are contributions, significant contributions, but most of the key things were developed so long ago. You know what I mean? And some of the stuff's even non-humans, like Neanderthals, they think we're using some of this stuff. So, even the way, so I don't even think this stuff is human specific, but it's definitely not specific to just one culture. And so I find the deeper you go in art history and in your understanding of that, the deeper the understanding of the simple things, the fundamentals, like a stick figure, and the deeper that understanding gets, the more you're able to contextualize all the modern masters. So you can compare Matesi and Vilpu, for example. You're able to do that because you're able to do that because you understand that, because Mike Matesi calls his thing force, right? Well, force is how Leonardo's motto is often translated into English, force. It's the same thing. He's teaching Leonardo. He's teaching Leonardo da Vinci. Now, I don't know if Mike's getting it from Leonardo directly, because he might have gotten a lot of it from Bridgman, who was getting it from Leonardo, but most of force is Leonardo da Vinci. It's based on his writings. So not knowing that, not being aware of that, is a disadvantage, because then you're like, oh, is force best if I want to do comics, or is force better for animation? Is Glenn better for you start having all these questions, but it's all this common set of tools. And so the deeper we can go with the common set of tools, I think the better the results are. It's going to be tight here, and then it's going to turn, and then it's going to be. If that's helpful. So at least personally, I mean, that's what we're here for, New Masters Academy. It's not like you have to translate texts from Latin or something to become a master, because the master apprentice system, it's a tradition of teaching, but we are trying to reconstruct a lot of this for you guys, and that's how that's being done, at least on my end. A lot of it is reverse engineering, historical research, this kind of stuff. That's where a lot of what I've learned has come from. In addition to all of the information and all of the stuff I got from my teachers, who were the best drawing teachers in the world. Okay, so that's the epigastric fossa.
Specifically about the plummet line.
Okay.
We already talked about this on the human. When dealing with non-bipedal creatures like animals, is this more based on the balance, the weight distribution?
Yes, it is about balance and weight distribution. So I was doing a little demo for group coaching. Maybe we can clip that and put it out. But I was talking about how this sort of diagram that's often taught. You guys have all seen it, right? You've seen this diagram that's taught, like that. They're like, oh, the pelvis is like this, and then you've seen this, right? This kind of thing. Well, the problem with this, it does help you get an idea that the flow is going like this, but I think this looks really, I'm actually like drawing it bad on purpose because I'm about to criticize it, so I'm making a straw man a little bit. But in reality, the head of the femur, the center of the knee joint, the center of the ankle, every inflection of the spine, the head of the humerus, and the external auditory meatus, the ear hole, those should align on a straight line from the side view. In this case, for example, their back. So although this is very dramatic, this is very much, and this comes from Leonardo. It's a Leonardo leg diagram that kept getting exaggerated over the years through the different drawing manuals. I've tracked the progress of this. But this sort of thing that you get today from, contemporary teachers is actually not correct anatomically, because this would be a very unhealthy leg. And the same thing applies from the front, because this is actually supposed to be here, and this is supposed to be here. So you're actually making an unhealthy leg, and that person would have trouble walking. So you're actually deforming the body, which is totally fine, because if you want that swoopy feel, but I actually don't care for how this looks. And there's a similar analogy. I probably shouldn't move things around. I'm going to screw it up. Hold on. Give me a sec. I got to go. Boom. Okay. So I set that up in advance. So look. So for example, here is the pubic symphysis, right? Acis to acis, right? Look, the head of the humor is here. The head of the femur is here. This is the now I'm talking more of a front view. That's the center of the knee, and that's the center of the ankle. This is going to be more like a straight line in a healthy person. And the reason why is that if I were to do that same sort of exaggeration that I was just talking about, like this, if I were to do this, right? The problem is that's bow-legged, like Yosemite Sam. You know what I mean? Look, it's like a bow-legged, like a Hanna-Barbera cowboy cartoon or something. Look, that's not natural. And if I did it the other way, where I brought it in, And so that's a problem I often see with artists and with teachers and contemporary artists, is that they're trying to make it feel more gestural because they want it to feel alive. But what they're really doing is they're deforming the body in a way that doesn't actually look more effective, because I think they're just confused about, I think they're confused. I think they need to exaggerate the curves or exaggerate the pose to make it feel alive, when in reality, the gestures are intrinsic to the human form. So the body already has gesture. You don't have to crank it up. You start by just trying to pick up on that. And so trying to find these natural alignments, so that actually is extremely useful. And it's essential if you're doing something in 3D, and it's essential if you're trying to do something that's more advanced. So I think not exaggerating too soon is really important. When you're first trying to loosen up and you're just trying to, like, you're doing like Sheldon Borenstein's class or whatever, it makes sense that it makes sense when you're first starting out. Maybe I'll put a little tone on this just because this is the last one, right, Caleb? Is this the last pose?
Yeah, and one last question before we take our break is that for students at New Masters Academy, one of the big benefits here is the variety of approaches that different instructors have. How do they go about thinking about this? Do they think about this while taking the other courses, when they're taking it?
Okay, so listen, that's the great strength of New Masters Academy. So if I thought that, like, let's say it was the Russian approach, or let's say it was the Riley approach, or let's say it was the Vilpu approach, if I thought one approach to art, one of these contemporary methods, and these are all, like, I'm naming some of the best in the world, if I thought one of those was all you needed, then it would be New Masters Atelier, and we would just teach that. But I don't actually believe that. And so when New Masters was created, the idea was that we were going to take the best masters alive today in various disciplines. So Ron Husband studied with the 9 Old Men. Mike Cedino was Beauty and the Beast animator and Little Mermaid and, like, these Disney Renaissance. Bill Perkins, Glenn Villepeu. We're getting these people because they represent the best ideas of the animation world. And then the same thing with comic books, and the same thing with illustrators and plain art painters, and the same thing with sculptors. So we tried to actually bring the best experts in the world together and craft a curriculum as a collaboration so that our students would not look like, because look, if you go to an atelier, the students are typically going to look like an inferior version of the teacher, but the teacher's not necessarily the goal. Our goal is to create a new renaissance, like neo-craftsmanship, a new movement, a new return to human craft and skill and mastery and control and beauty and communicating your own ideas more effectively. So our ethos has to do with pushing the craft forward, because we don't think art has been solved and now it's just what is. We actually want to move the craft forward. That's the difference between New Masters Academy and other schools and priorities. We're not just trying to train you to get an entry-level job in entertainment that might not even exist in a few years. What we're trying to do is the new masters are you. We're trying to make you into better versions than any of your teachers. Leonardo da Vinci said, it's a poor pupil who does not surpass his master. So it's your job to get better than me. It's my job to get better than Glenn. It's Glenn's job to get better than Harry. We're all supposed to be doing that. And I think that the best tool for that is actually bringing the best ideas, so that Glenn is amazing for these things. And Juliet Aristides is great at these things. And Steve Houston is great at these things. And all these different teachers are bringing something to the table, and they've been selected, and the curriculum has been crafted to sort of turn you into, like, uber artists. You guys are supposed to be like, you're like the superheroes we're trying to create. This is like, what's that Netflix show based on that comic? It's like Umbrella Academy or something. We're like, you guys are like science. We're trying to turn you into better artists than anybody who's alive today. And so because of that, it is collaborative. And so you need to do Sheldon Borenstein's intro to figure and in stress-free sketching. And you need to sketch loose and tell a story, and don't worry about accuracy so much, and push it and make it scribble and make it move. And then you also want to learn academic drawing. You want to learn from artists like Cornelia, and you want to learn from artists like Amy, and you want to get that precision, and you want to be able to, or Renee Wang's, her accuracy is fantastic. She teaches the second course, FODAP, in the Foundations program. So it's if you guys, hopefully we'll clip this, but I was praising Gordon for his unbelievable project that got selected for this thing we're going to show today. And part of what Gordon did that was so useful is he had studied with Glenn for like 6 years, and he studied with all these other teachers, but he was combining his different new master's teachers together, and then the result was something that is unique that none of those teachers could have done. That's what we want for you. So we're not just trying to teach you how to do demos the way the teacher does the demo. We're trying to teach you, give you the tools that are more foundational so that you can become the best version of yourself as possible, and so that you can create new styles. We're not trying to teach a style here. So we don't think there is one superior style and we all need to have the one superior. That's not the approach of New Masters Academy. Not that there's anything wrong with that approach, because we also have we have an apprentice, we have Jacobo workshop, and for our apprentice at our carving studio, we quite literally, all that matters is that person gets the best knowledge the way we understand it. As that's the master apprentice. So there's a role for both of those, but New Masters is all about collaboration. So do Sheldon, do Bill Perkins, do Mike Matesi, do Juliet Aristides, do Hollis Dunlap, and Danny Gagliotti, and Chris Legaspi, and Stephen Bauman. Work with all of these artists who are masters at their craft at New Masters in the way that we have structured it for you. So with the tracks, if you do that, you're going to, in addition to the stuff I'm trying to add here, which I feel like is more historical and foundational and more like upstream, it's more like the binary code, it's closer to the hardware than those structures, but how all of that enriches your process and gives you ideas on how to do your work, that's your prerogative. And that's what's so exciting, is that you are going to make your own style. So it makes sense to brand a style and sell it. Why is it the Riley method? When I first heard about the Riley method, I asked my teachers about it, and they kind of laughed. I don't know if it was, I think it was Glenn and Steve at the same time. I was like, what is this Riley method thing that somebody was talking about? They're like, it's just illustration drawing, is what they said. It's just illustration drawing. The Riley method is the branding that schools have used to sell it or to sell books, but it's not really different from other American poster illustration of like the 60s to 90s. It's got this kind of look. So oftentimes we're like trying to sell something and market something. We're marketing this course, we're marketing that course. We don't do it like that at New Masters because it's one subscription, it's one like holistic education, but when things are being sold, and so that marketing and that sort of tribalism and that team sport kind of aspect of it, I think that actually gets in the way of mastery, because being closed-minded allows you to focus on a subset of tools, but you don't know if those are truly the best tools for the job, and you really can't. So I suggest adaptability, humility. When you study with the teacher, do it their way, compare and contrast, try to apply it to your personal work, and keep adding to your fundamental understanding of art. And that's what I recommend as a lifelong pursuit. And so if you want to make comics, don't just study comic artists, study all art. If you want to do video game art, don't just look at video games. You want to be as well-rounded as possible. That's very much the New Masters Academy ethos. And so my advice is, I'm not saying any of these teachers are wrong. These teachers are the best. I'm just saying that there is a fundamental language of art that got fragmented. And so the engineers and the architects, they got all the good curvilinear grid CAD design stuff, and then the artists who sketch from life, we need that too. Why did we give that up? Oh, well, that's character design, or that's production art, or that's illustration. So we categorize it. And so what I think happened is the tradition of art fragmented into all these different specialities, right? And then no one person is a master of all of it, which is why we can't match the quality of the old masters. So part of New Masters is also reversing the prism, like Newton's prism that would split light. There's no Newton without Leonardo, in my opinion. But Newton's prism that would split light into its different component parts, I'm trying to reverse that with New Masters Academy. It's a team effort. That was the goal here. So we're taking that prism and we're taking that rainbow and then we're bringing it back to that single foundational source. But that doesn't mean it's some uber style. It just means it's a higher level of understanding and mastery that then you can apply to any application that you want. It doesn't matter if you want to do cute characters that are like 2 heads tall and simple in some ways, you can do those better. Or if you want to do like a Baroque painting like The Massacre of the Innocents by Rubens, or like Dewar's art, whatever it is you want to do, this understanding, we believe, will help you. And that's why New Masters is different than any other art school and any other source. Most art schools are focused on career training. And so that's a very low bar compared to what we are doing. And most online learning is courseware. They're selling brush packs. They're selling it. They're not really structuring it as an education. They're just trying to sell the content. And so the people are recording it and sending it in, and they're packaging it and they're selling it. Caleb, can I show the video? Would this be a good time to show the Lotus hand, by the way, since I'm streaming right now and the music doesn't work on Google Meets? Because I could do that and then we can sign off for now because I think we're out of time. Do you think that works?
Yeah, so we need to take a break.
At this second, we do?
We're about 6 minutes over.
All right, I only need 2 minutes for this. Okay, so guys, real quick, and we're going to be available today. A lot more of these questions are going to get answered. I just wanted to show something really special for a minute here because we just finished a project I mentioned our sculpture workshop. We actually just finished a project at Jacobo Workshop, and this is for Johanna. This is a piece that's going to be on display, and I want to share that with you because I want to lead by example. I think that's really important. I think it's an important part that we're not just teachers, that we're actually trying to push the art forward in the world. So I'm going to show you this. This is not a 3D render. This is a real sculpture that is currently being on its way to New York to be on display. And I just want to share this with you because I'm really proud of it. So give me 1 sec here. Tell me if you can hear the audio on this, Caleb. Give me 1 second as I reset it, and I'll turn off the other things here. So this is 33 inches tall, and this is a sculpture by Johanna. It's called Lotus Hand, and she did this in collaboration with traditional Chinese dancers of the Shanghai Dance Company in New York, and she was asked to so she did this live study dancers at CC, and then she took that life study and she basically created this new version, which is more classical sculpture, as you can see. And she created this new sculpture using essentially traditional design. So it's a celebration of 5,000 years of Chinese culture. This is something that's really important. It's hard. But really what I want to show is the synthesis of observation and nature.
The music is a little louder than you right now.
Okay.
So we're kind of missing what you're saying.
Okay. So this might not be what you were thinking about, right? Like, because I don't know of any gilded artwork. I don't know of any artwork that looks like this at all actually being made. So what I want, the takeaway here is that when you learn the foundations and you try to master those foundations, the artwork that you create is going to be completely unique to you. This is Johanna. This is not Joshua. This is not Steve Houston. This is definitely Johanna. But the things that are making the artwork successful, this is also, she gilded this in 24 karat gold using the German system. So she's been gilding everything for weeks while the foundry was sending us the casting so that we could practice it. So this was a very high, and that's a marble base, very high risk project. But the only reason it was successful was because of a reliance on geometry and fundamentals. And that's how this project, which was done very quickly, we didn't have a deadline for this invitational. So it was done, the reason it was successful is the same reason that any art is successful, and that's the foundations. So I don't want you guys to think that this is one style we're trying to present here. I want to show you that the artwork is as individual and unique as we are as individual people. So if you guys would like to see that in person, it's going to be on display at the Salmagundi Club, which is a historical club that like Norman Rockwell and a bunch of artists were part of over the years. It's going to be shown at an invitational, the Hartley Invitational. It's going to be on view on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. And then on May 9th, there's going to be a reception. And so Johanna and I are flying out there. I think Caleb, you're going too. Are you and the kids are going to go as well?
Yeah, we're going to be there.
Yeah, so we're going to be there, and so we'd love to meet you guys. And so if you'd like to come and meet us there on May 9th at 6 p.m., we'd love to see you there. You can see the work. Odd Nerdrum is showing. Cornelia, a bunch of amazing artists. David LaFell, who is a master, who was Michael Siegel, a new Masters Academy instructor's teacher. So a lot of amazing artists are going to be there. And I think that's really important to connect with what contemporary art is being made at the highest levels. And so if you guys are, Alicia Ponzio is going to be there. She's a sculptor that I really like her work. We'd love to see you there. So May 9th, go online, look at Hartley Invitational, Salmagundi Club. Maybe I have some of the details wrong, but we'd love to see you there. And hopefully this was useful for you guys. Obviously, this isn't a class, it's a 1-hour demo, so I can only scratch the surface of what I'm talking about here, but hopefully that was helpful for you guys. And if you want to learn more, and if any of this was interesting to you, come join us on the Discord, subscribe to New Masters, get involved. We talk about this stuff in group coaching every week. And so it's something that we've been developing as almost as a community rather than isolated artists or whatever.
Yeah, and right now is an amazing time to join because for the week of World Art Day, we have 50% off one of our best annual plans, and that comes with 3 months of group coaching. So you can check out what Joshua was talking about here. It also comes with this really helpful student planner that you can use for the year. So you can find that on the New Masters Academy website. Just go to the homepage. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and take a look at some of this art that was submitted. We don't have that much time to take a look, but we're going to take maybe 20 minutes to take a look at some of the art that was submitted.
Okay, so am I ending my stream here, Caleb, or am I sticking around with the BRB screen?
Yeah, put up the BRB screen, and then we'll be back in about 5-6 minutes.
I think you said 20 minutes. 5-6 minutes, we'll be back?
Yeah, and then we've got about 20 minutes to go over
okay.
to look at.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Hey, we've only got 15 minutes here because we're getting set up for the interview with Glenn. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. Caleb will relay them to me. I don't have time to do anything more than really just react to what was sent in. So Theo, it's great to see you. We haven't talked in a while. Theo's a new Masters Academy student, or was, but one of the new Masters Academy students who is definitely on my radar because he's, as you can see, he's really good. Theo, I think that this is working really well. I think that came out pretty. I think actually all of these are pretty successful here. You know, it does look like you're leaning a little more on a Vilpuian thing, which makes sense. He was also my most influential teacher. The only thing I'll say is, like here, for example, be careful that we don't do what I was saying, which is you don't want to like do this, right? You don't want to do this kind of a thing. Do you see what I'm doing here? Because it's like, it starts to look like it's like some kind of alien creature, you know? For it to be human, and not, we need to kind of be here. And so then these curves are going to play against that straight reality. Do you see?
We can't see your screen.
Oh shit, sorry. You're just seeing my big stupid head. That would have been helpful earlier. Okay, so good job on this. Good job on this. Good job overall. But don't let, what I don't want to happen is this. I don't want this stuff to get too broken. See that leg's broken? See that? It's too much. We want to relate it to those points, basically, that I was talking about. But these are pretty successful. I think overall, I think you're getting a good result. I like this one too. But it can be good. Try to get all the way down to the feet if you can. This one's nice. This one's nice. It goes up high in the back. Try to find a better center line when you're doing this one. Johan, are you printing something right now? So, are you printing something? Look, I just thought it was a ghost printer. This center line, you want to get this center line really, like the profile of a face, you really want to get that, because I think what you're going to find is that you've sort of excised this area here, the way you, or at least it looks like that the way you're drawing it. So as soon as possible, try to get your center lines in place. I'm drawing on the layer. Try to get your center lines to be as careful and as accurate and as beautiful as your silhouettes, and that will help you with this. The center line will basically help you with this stuff. So what I really want is I want you to nail the center line. That goes for everybody. That'll help you, because you see when it's done too quickly, it doesn't really feel natural. So it might do this as a result of the shoulder compressing the rhomboids and the trapezius and such. But don't forget that it's not actually just a squiggly line. It's actually the spine influencing the surface, and as well as the muscles that can overlap that. And because it's that, I think you want to use a little bit more. Precision in how you deal with it. Let me see which one this. Oh, I think I see the one it was. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to find the reference for you so I can show you. So I'm looking for this one right here. Okay, so for this one, for example, the way I was thinking about it is we come up to the apex of the head, and then that would be the chin, and the actual movement is going more like this way, and then it straightens out, and then it comes back, and then it drops at the buttocks from where sort of the posterior aspect or the posterior plane, if you're thinking about like a box, and then the inferior plane, so the bottom plane, come together. So you got to really get it plotted accurately in terms of where it's going to go, and then more than that, you have to turn it into these beautiful, like what you're doing, you turn it into these beautiful curves, like these Fioletti curves, but get it locked into place. Good job, Theo. Movita. These are looking better than the last gestures I saw for you for sure. I think a little bit of that same problem here that I was talking about. It's just too much, right? It's breaking. So if the pubic symphysis is here and that's ACIS and it's turned like this, maybe this is the head of the humerus. Well, then here to wherever you have the center of your knee to the ankle, if the knee bends, obviously, but if it's not bending, then these are going to be in alignment, and then you need to get these curves to actually work around that, if that makes sense. But these are definitely improved. Careful that these are distorting, like they're kind of distorting this way, right? And so what can help is actually thinking of that rib cage and then the pit of the neck, and then, like I was saying, really follow that center line down and really figure out what that stuff is doing. So getting it more like on both sides with the rounds, that'll help you make it more consistent. And probably here we want it to be a little more, but you're thinking the right way. You're thinking the right way. As for proportions, you tend to make the hands real small, and this is too much tilt. I don't think the pelvis can actually tilt that much. I think that's an example of what I'm saying, where you're kind of you're pushing it too much, where it's breaking. Maybe. Let me see if I can find this one. I just loaded up a bunch of screenshots from the video, and I'm just looking for it. Okay, yeah, I found it. Okay, so here I think the key is this has got to go. This is angled more. It's angled more here, and so the center line needs to. The center lines. This is called frontalism, right? So you're just like, okay, I have one thing, I have another thing, and then I put the thing between the thing. We're going to tend to put things towards the midpoint. So that's what you're doing here. It's called frontalism, as another word for it. But really, we need that center line to be more moving this way and then coming down. So you need to rotate your center line. You need to rotate your center line like that. But I think this exercise was good for you. I'm seeing some good stuff. Obviously, when it gets quick, it's hard. But here's what I'm talking about. This is too much. That's too much. We don't want to do figures that. We don't want to do legs that look like this. And from the front, that's not what we want. That's not human. And we don't want to do legs that look too much. It's okay. You can exaggerate a little bit. It's up to you, right? But we don't want to do, in my opinion, we don't want to do legs from the side like this, because those alignments I talked about are supposed to be here, here, and here. And so if I did it like this, then this is how distorted my leg is geometrically. And then from this angle, if it's this and then here, it's, well, because this is supposed to be a standing leg that's straight, because I was just going with the angle here, so let me just do it as straight. So let's say we're basing on the knee. Well, then the ankle should be here. So this is actually a distorted leg, and it's distorted by this much. And if that's where this is supposed to be, then it's distorted by. So that's how distorted those legs would be. So use those alignments. These are from Leonardo and from earlier, but they've been incorporated into medicine. So look for the line of gravity. Look for medical texts that talk about deformities and pathologies of the way and injuries of bones and stuff, and you'll find. When I'm giving you this stuff, it's Leonardo, but it's also medicine. And so there is a proper way for the thing to be balanced, and then there can be ways in which it's less healthy, which no big deal. No one's body's perfect, obviously, but if they're bad enough, there could be like corrective surgeries and stuff. So I find it useful to look for the joints. So not the trochanter, the greater trochanter. More important for me is the head of the femur, because the head of the femur has a vertical alignment with the knee and the ankle. The trochanter doesn't. So that's also an important landmark, and I was drawing it. But Jocelyn, I don't know if you're here, but man, not bad for how fast we were going. I think, and your figure drawings have taken a big jump up lately anyway. So I think you're probably overreacting to this feeling of waviness here, because I think what we really want to do is break it down more into, okay, break it more down like the Fioletti curves if you're going to do it. And then there's an area of rest under here, and then it's a little bit of a swelling, and then it's like an overlap. So I want you to think more like that with your lines, and I would try to avoid doing this, because this ended up just looking like Dr. Katz. I don't know if you know that animation. I used to love it. I think they brought it back. Dr. Katz. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's hilarious animation, but it's like squiggly. That looks squiggly. So that's one thing, is use the Fioletti curves. And I think you were in that. If you're not, ask me in group coaching. I'll help you. The other thing is we want to. My references are actually really hard to see, unfortunately, because I don't have the video up anymore. But relate this right here across to its antagonist up here, and then relate how this pulls here with its flow back here, and how this drops here, and let the buttocks on the far side be lower. This is how you know how the pelvis is rotated. It has to do with the overlap of one buttocks to the other. So be a little more careful with that stuff. I think the head was actually handled okay. I think that this definitely is probably going to, it's going to drop more. I think you've got it coming out too much. And this dropping makes this feel straighter by contrast. So I think you missed a little bit with that. And this gets tough because he's got extremely broad shoulders, the model. He's got like extremely broad shoulders, but then he's got this real thin waist. So it's like a classic bodybuilder's look. And because of that, it's a little hard to place the shoulders, because you're like, really, it's that far over? Because he's got long clavicles too. But I think you're going to find that this is more angled this way, and maybe this needs to drop more like that. And then this is going to be more, the scapula is rotated quite dramatically, and it's sort of pointing towards the ear. And I'm just going from that superior border, medial border, and then I'm just connecting those with a straight line, and I'm going to the wide point or the quad of the acromion process. I don't expect that to make sense to everybody, but since it's a recording, and it's probably good, I think this is just coming out too much there. And then we want to get a feeling for how the obliques here are connecting to the back of the rib cage, and then how the rib cage is actually being exposed here. For lack of a better way of doing it, I can do it like that, just to show that this is sort of poking out, right? And then these other forms are sort of wrapping like this, but you're not bad. Since you're a group coaching student, we've got plenty of time to talk about this, but really nice work. Easy E, rest in peace, Easy E. I think you're getting the right idea. Just be careful with this, because the leg is none of the body is. The limbs are not symmetrical from the lateral to medial side, or from the inferior to superior, or from the anterior to posterior. So in other words, the limbs are not, they're symmetrical one limb to the other, like a left and right shoe, but they're not symmetrical. So the problem here is I'm seeing a lot of, I guess, these sort of like mandorla, not mandala, but mandorla shapes. So you're tending to do that kind of a shape, which it's a beautiful shape, but the problem is that is not doesn't feel like the figure. Do you see how you're doing that repeatedly? So you actually want to, maybe I can show an example, but you actually want to, this is the packet, this is the Tuscany packet from our Tuscany workshop. Let me see if I can show you an example. Well, I mean, really, honestly, any of these, really. But here's the, if you look at Vitruvian Man, look at the limbs. Do you see the limbs? You see how they're not symmetrical from front to back or from left to right or from top to bottom? You need to stagger your forms, because what it's doing is it's not looking natural because of that. But obviously you're going really quick here. Be careful. You're tending to place the knees in the wrong height sometimes, so be careful with that. And I really would do what I did, really, which is this. I would do this, and I would do this, and then I would come down like this, and then I would divide that in half, and I would divide that in half, and then I would look for where that head, and you're just visualizing this on the video, so you're just imagining it, which obviously comes with experience. You can hold up a plumb line. You could print it and put tracing paper over it and draw the overlays over it. You could do that as well, but I want you to relate what's going on with the figure to the vertical line. That's the biggest thing, because I think what you're going to find is that it will help you fix everything, because the balance is off and many different layers of things are going to be off all the time. That will help you with that. It looks like when you have more time to render, you get further with it, but if you improve these, that's going to be the most important thing you can do, even though with more time you're able to do a lot. Try watching the video again and give it another shot, or try it a few times and see if you can get more out of it. But I don't know if you are easy. I know I've seen you on the Discord. I don't know if you're a new master's student, but if you want to do more of this and then just share with me or tag me on the Discord or show up in class or whatever, I'm happy to, when I have more time, I can give you more. My number one thing is don't repeat these symmetrical shapes, and put the plumb line or the plummet line. Get that plummet line and then define how tall and how low your sculpture is. Because even masters, if you don't say it's going here on the page, they'll run out of room on the page. Happy birthday and congratulations. It's all smushed. That happens. That happens to the best of us. Amelie? Yeah, nice work, Amelie. I think it looks like, here's what I'm sensing here. A lot of good stuff. But what I'm sensing is you're getting that, and then the attention you're sort of losing energy as you move down. So here, it's a little more solid up here, and then it's sort of, do you see that as you move down? So instead of that, take a page out of Leonardo's book and Bridgman, because Bridgman got it from Leonardo, and sort of position this and then figure out exactly where the feet are in relation to that, and then check the navel, the pubic symphysis, the pit of the neck, check everything. This is how I'm getting that accuracy, by the way. I also, you guys couldn't see this, but I did have the quarter lines, little ticks off to the side from a previous version of it that I left outside the crop, so I could look to see where the halfway mark is, so I didn't make my halfway mark too high or low, but really you just want to slow down. So I did that quicker than, because I knew I didn't have time to do that, but spend time on getting this right. But this is where the accuracy comes from. The accuracy comes from being able to just find the positions of things off of a center line. That's where the accuracy comes from. And it's also where the balance comes from, which is critical. Balance is one of the most important things in art, and it's really under-taught. I mean, obviously artists like Carl Ganas and Mike Matessian do teach it at New Masters, but generally in the art world, balance is not very well understood. So try to get the whole figure down. Also, because you're not going from top to bottom, I think what's probably happening is there's some proportion issues that are arising because of that. So head, do head, get the shoulders, and then get down there and place those feet, and then work your way in. I know it's hard to do that. I know it's hard to do that if you're not used to it, because and we're just like, oh, I'm just sketching here, and I don't really know where it's going to go, and I'm just feeling it out as I go, and I'm just sort of making it up, and then maybe that's high and maybe that's low. Like a lot of us, like we'll sketch more freely or whatever, but that's just a rough sketch. That's not going to come out the way you want it to come out. In order for it to actually come together and have the right kinds of proportions. But one thing you could do is if you do a nice figure, then you can do a line alongside that, and then you can sort of just use the same positions as a starting point, and then you could actually do another pose that is, or even another character altogether. And then you have that center line there too. You could do a totally different character type. You see what I mean?
So we're at the end mark here.
Okay.
We have the meeting, an interview with Glenn. So everyone, if you want to jump over to the YouTube channel with the Glenn interview, that's going to be.
I don't know if they can hear that. I don't know if they can hear you or not. But guys, we're moving on to the interview with Glenn. So it's going to be a new stream. It's still on the YouTube channel, but it's another stream. We're going to end this stream. We're going to jump into that stream in just a moment. So please join us there, and we'll continue the fun. Thank you so much for joining me. So Caleb, I'm going to kill the recording, right? To get on Google Meets.
Kill it, and I'll leave it on for just another minute to make sure nothing gets cut off.
Am I going to keep the local recording going or no?